Welcome and namaste from Dhananjaya Kumar to another episode, Great Minds, Great Quotes. And the subject today is Enlightenment. There are quite a few quotations I have, and I'll begin with this one by Osho. When Buddha attained enlightenment and people asked him, "What have you attained?" When Buddha attained enlightenment and people asked, "What have you attained?" Buddha said, "I have not attained anything. I have only lost something." So it's important to understand what Buddha could have meant, that I have not attained anything, I have lost something. So I can make a short list of what he probably thought in saying these words, "I have lost something." What he lost? He lost attachments, he lost attachment with ideas, he lost his doubts, his worries, his journey, his search ended, his mind became calm and peaceful. All the struggle in his life, all the lust for power, all the greed, all these qualities he has lost. So what is left is enlightenment. It's a beautiful quote. When Buddha attained enlightenment and people asked him, "What have you attained?" he said, "I have not attained anything. I have only lost something." Another beautiful one from Gautam Buddha. The world never begins, but it ends. The world never begins, but it ends. Enlightenment begins, but it never ends. Ignorance has no beginning, but it has an end. Awareness has only a beginning, but no end. So he's comparing the beginning with ignorance. So the world has no beginning, but it ends. Even today, scientists never could claim that the world begins. The Big Bang theory is gradually diminishing in importance. So scientists now talk about the cyclical universe, as in Vedic science. But that's another topic. So Gautam Buddha had said, the world never begins. We don't know if and when. But we see ending of everything in front of our eyes. Every small and big things ends. So the world never begins, but it ends, because we see constituents of the world ending. Enlightenment begins, but it never ends. In other words, an enlightened person never becomes unenlightened, because he cannot lose his peace and tranquility and become worried about the same thing that he was before, prior to enlightenment. So in a very crude way I'm saying this, but enlightenment begins, but it never ends. An intelligent person cannot become an ignorant person. An ignorant person can become an intelligent person. Ignorance has no beginning, but it has an end. Awareness has only a beginning, but no end. So awareness is akin to enlightenment, has a beginning, but no end. So I'll read it again. The world never begins, but it ends. Enlightenment begins but it never ends. Ignorance has no beginning but it has an end. Awareness has only beginning but no end. This quotation by Nisargadatta Maharaj appears to have a paradox in it, but let's try to resolve it. Rare is the realized who discloses his realization. In other words, a realized person, a enlightened person, will never come and say, "Hey, Mr., Mrs., I am enlightened. You see, nice to meet you." You've never seen that, never heard that. So, rare is the realized who discloses his realization, and fortunate are those who have met him. In other words, those who are seeking knowledge, wisdom, intelligence, and ultimately enlightenment will seek out a guide, a guru, and recognize when they meet such a person. So, rare are those who have met an enlightened person, although an enlightened person will never announce that he is enlightened. So, it is a search, and that search is worthwhile. Short one by Nisargadatta Maharaj. Personal entity and enlightenment cannot go together. So the message here is an enlightened person is not a limited personal entity, but he is a universal being. He spreads his knowledge, his presence is inspiring. So he is a larger person, larger personality, more universal, more global. He is not an individual entity. Personal entity and enlightenment cannot go together. Here is an interesting one by Carl Jung. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. So, by enlightenment, because the word light is in there, so one may think that enlightened means there is a lot of light. So, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making darkness conscious. Darkness is not light, absence of light, but it is still related to light because it is absence of light. There is no separate entity or existence called darkness. You cannot look for darkness. Darkness does not exist. Only light or absence of light exists. So, Carl Jung is saying one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And that consciousness is the light. So when consciousness appears, all the ignorance disappears. It's like you take a candle in a dark room and you can see what's in the room. So that candle, the light in the candle is the consciousness that is enlightenment, and it removes darkness. Henry David Thoreau says, I have never met a man who was quite awake. I have never met a man who was quite awake. How could I have looked him in the face? So what Thoreau is saying is that an enlightened person has a glow in the face that an ordinary person cannot understand and cannot withstand. Cannot know why this glow. So, for himself he's saying, I have never yet a man who was quite awake, because he has not seen that glow of enlightenment in people around him. That's what he's hinting at. I have never yet met a man who was quite awake. If I had, what he's saying actually, how could I have looked him in the face? He would be so impressed, so dazzled. Dazzle is the word. That he would be so dazzled. How could have seen his face, the glow in the face? I have never met a man who was quite awake. How could I have looked him in the face? This one is by Alan Watts. Enlightenment or awakening is not the creation of a new state of affairs, but a recognition of what already is. In other words, you may think that you go somewhere and you will be enlightened, or enlightened is something, an event that will happen all of a sudden. So it is not that you have to create a situation, an environment to be enlightened. What Alan Watts is saying is that you recognize the reality where you are and reality of who you are. That is enlightenment. So one last time I'll read. Enlightenment or awakening is not the creation of a new state of affairs, but a recognition of what already is. That isness, the awareness of isness, is enlightenment. Thank you for listening. Appreciate your patience and attention, and we'll meet again soon.